Thank you all for joining the Graduate Academy's workshop series. Today's topic is titled Academic Mentoring of Undergraduate and Graduate Students, Postdoctoral Fellows, and Junior Faculty. Joining us today is Dr. Sarah Jordan, Program Director, Associate Professor, and Graduate Coordinator. She'll be discussing the basics of good mentorship and sharing strategies for cultivating mentoring relationships with these different groups. I'm going to hand it over to her to get us started.
Thank you, Jessica. I appreciate it. Can you hear me okay? Everybody hear me okay? Okay, great. And we only have a few on the call, and if we were face-to-face, it'd be very interactive as well. But I really want to make sure that this workshop is tailored to those who are present, because I want to make sure it's a good use of your time. So I would like everybody, I understand if you don't want to be on video or can't be on video, but I'd like everybody just to kind of go around and state your name, what your background is, what you're hoping to get out of the workshop today. Whoever wants to go first.
Go first.
Okay.
Excuse me. Hi everybody, my name is Shaima. I'm a PhD candidate at the Department of Geoscience. I have taken the mentorship certification with the Grad College last year. And this year I am volunteering with CSUN to mentor some undergrad students. This workshop would be a refresher for how to be a good mentor or some mentoring strategies.
Great. So thank you for sharing. So you're currently, are you going to be mentoring undergraduate students?
Yes.
I guess that was the part, who you're going to be mentoring, and yeah, that would be helpful. Thank you. Whoever would like to go next.
Hi, my name is James. I'm a PhD student over in the hotel college. I do mentor undergraduate students at UNLV, but most of my mentoring is actually in the workplace with my direct reports. I've been mentoring in either an official or unofficial capacity for probably about 15 years at this point, so it's always good to sharpen the saw and hear from other people what their experiences are like and how I can incorporate those best practices.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, it is James, but Daniel's picture popped up, so it is James Larson, right? Okay, just to make sure, because Daniel's name was there, and then James's picture popped up and went away. So I was like, well, maybe he goes by James and he's Daniel, but I just wanted to clarify. Okay, thanks. Who would like to go next?
Sure, I'll go next. Yeah.
Okay.
It'll be, the right picture popping up, I guess.
Yeah, okay, there we go, Daniel.
So, my name is Daniel Perez. I'm a PhD candidate in the Department of Anthropology. And the main thing I plan on taking away is, I guess, more strategies to work with undergraduate mentees on a larger scale. I'm currently working with the RAMP program on a one-on-one basis, and just like to know how to adapt that into a larger group setting.
Okay, to a larger group setting. Okay, great. All right, who would like to go next?
So we have Drewer and also someone that called in, but I can't see their name.
Okay, yes, we have a phone number. Oh, and there's Bridget too.
Yeah. I guess since I unmuted myself, I don't mind sharing as well. This is
sure
an opportunity for me as well. I am also a student. My name is Jess Sori. I'm a PhD student in the Department of Teaching and Learning, studying curriculum and instruction. My cognate is higher education. And I have mentored both undergraduate and graduate students formally within higher ed, but also in past positions outside of higher ed, but working with both undergraduate and graduate students. Yeah, and for me, definitely a refresher, but also strategies specifically, building rapport with new students that we haven't worked with in the past in this virtual setting. That I think is probably the biggest challenge, because when I have worked with students in the past and then we had to transfer into a virtual setting, that was definitely easier to just continue the ball rolling. But starting mentoring relationships virtually.
Okay.
And then Nev did share a great idea in the chat. If anyone doesn't feel comfortable sharing, 100% okay. If you would like to share a little bit about yourself in the chat box, that would be super helpful. Again, because Dr. Jordan is really here to adapt the workshop and the presentation and the session specifically for us, right? So that's really great. So we'll keep an eye out in the chat, Dr. Jordan, and see if anyone.
I will. I just pulled it up. Thank you.
Yeah.
If I miss something, please let me know if I'm sharing my screen and I can't see the chat, if somebody has a question or comment. Thanks.
Right on.
Yeah, so either you can share orally by turning on your mic, or you can type in the chat, just to, again, just to kind of give me an idea what your background is and what you're interested in getting out of today's workshop. Anyone else?
And you just let me know when you're ready.
Sure. Okay. I just don't want to cut anybody else off if there was somebody else that wanted to share. Again, my style is very interactive, so I don't necessarily think it'd be very helpful for me just to talk the whole time. So, okay. Well, if you think of something, it sounds like there isn't anybody else unmuting themselves at this point. So, yeah, I'm ready to share the screen whenever you are. So it sounds like strategies, and it sounds like most of you, or those that have shared, have had some experience with mentoring, mainly undergrad, but some in the workforce and some graduate students as well. So I kind of just asked best hopes in terms of what are your best hopes, and you can continue to put those in the chat as well. What would you like to get out of today's session workshop? So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, so why is mentoring important? I'll share just a bit, and then I want to hear from others. You know, one thing that makes the educational experience unique in higher ed is I would say the opportunity or possibility for mentoring. You know, if you're an undergraduate student at a large university, you might not get a lot of mentoring. You may have an advisor, but you may not have a one-on-one close relationship with a faculty member that can kind of help mentor you into grad school. Now, a lot of people that go to grad school have had that mentoring as an undergrad and some guidance and direction about how to get into graduate school. So you may have experienced that yourself. But mentoring is important. I was just thinking about this too earlier because we were in faculty meeting, and I was just talking about the role of the university and how it may change over the years. And one of the pieces is, you know, as a faculty member, we're multiple hats. And so, for example, as an associate professor, program director, I am a professor, I'm a therapist, I teach undergrads, right? I'm a mentor, I do research, I have all of these things. And so the beauty of that is that mentoring is I can help mentor students. I came from a doc program, I taught in a doc program for 12 years, as I can really help mentor them in all of these areas. At the master's level, being a master's program, it's more about mentoring them to be a therapist, to give them the clinical skills. So I think what you do as a mentor, and I'm just looking at names here. James mentioned that he has some experience in the workplace. That's going to be a very different mentoring experience than in an academic setting. But why do you all think mentoring is important? You probably think it's important to some degree, or you wouldn't be in this workshop probably, but I wanted to hear from you. Feel free to turn your mics off or type something in the chat.
I think I can go first.
Okay, yes.
Well, I'm thinking, well, from the point of view of a mentee, I mean, life is so short and it's so difficult to go through all the experiences yourself. Get some advice and learn from others' experiences as well as what you encounter in your life. So this is why mentoring is important from my point of view. Well,
Great.
from the mentor point of view, it's always, I mean, we always want to share our experiences with others and let others learn from our own experiences and our points of view. And that's yeah.
Great. So learning from others and from our point of view, our experiences, they can be good things and bad things too, right? What not to do. And you probably have had mentors, or maybe as a mentor yourself, you have advised students, I wouldn't do it this way. This is how I did it, but I wouldn't do it that way. That seems invaluable too, because, you know, taking the classes are you know, in graduate school is one thing, but knowing all the other pieces and how our classes interact and our disciplines is another piece. And then applying that to the real world, right? Whether it's academic real world, which is like kind of the real world, or industry, which is really the hands-on piece there. What about others? And I'm a therapist. I'm not afraid for silence, so you don't have to worry about that part. So who else would like to share? Why is mentoring important?
I'll go ahead.
Yeah, Daniel.
Yeah, so from my perspective, I see mentoring as important because it provides really almost like a scaffolding and framework for whether it be undergraduate or graduate students, but a framework to really know how to navigate maybe an unknown territory, whether it's you know academic program or research project or whatever it may be. I think it's almost like the training wheels or scaffoldings or some other similar analogy that would be sort of conducive to that.
Absolutely. I think that's another great way to put it. And just put in the comment, research shows that there are direct benefits, especially for women. And that is interesting too. I know that some of the early research that's come out about COVID even has been focused on women and dual roles and that whole idea of work-life balance, which is kind of which, you know, there's a better way to put that, I'm sure. But at least in our culture and society, the expectation is as a female to be in perhaps a more male-dominated field, or to be an academic and to be a woman, and to also, if you have a family as well, and balancing that is very different for women than men. But it helps to show. I know for myself, there were several female faculty in couple and family therapy, which is the field that I'm in, that really talked about their own strategies for becoming a successful academic. And I know that I really looked towards them because they were living, right? They were living the experience. They were in the dream job. They, you know, had a family. They were able to navigate all of that. And so I think that's very helpful as well. Anybody else? Why is mentoring important? Either in the chat or if you want to unmute your microphone. And if you didn't share earlier, that's okay. You can still chime in, or if you joined late, that's fine as well. Okay, well, I just wanted to give some space there, and I will give more as we go along. If you want to, Jess, if you want to move the slide, that would be great. So what do you look for in a mentor? So I want you to take a moment and think about the best mentor that you had. And this can be undergrad, this can be even when you're younger, and the worst. So the best and the worst mentor. I'm going to take a moment too, and I'm going to think about my two top picks. The best mentor and the worst. I guess if they were a mentor and they weren't doing a good job, maybe we'd call them something else. But they were trying to be a mentor. They were in a role of a mentor, but they didn't do a very good job. So think about those two people throughout your life, who they might be, and either jot a note or just take a moment. So someone in that role, and did they do a very good job? So someone who's a great mentor and someone who's a pretty lousy mentor. Okay. All right. Would anybody like to share? Don't share names, of course. But can you share a little bit about, now that you have the people in mind, can you share, let's start with the worst. Can you share what the characteristics were of one of the worst mentors you had? How would you describe them?
I mean, so I just had a mentor that like we met basically weekly, and they never could remember anything that we ever talked about, and so it just the same things over and over again. And so it was frustrating, and so it was really just not helpful really at all. Because it was like going over the same thing. So I guess it would be, I saw somebody put in the chat, poor listener, and so I guess it would kind of go in that theme too, of being a poor listener, because I don't know, maybe a poor rememberer too, that's not a word, but you know what I mean. So
great. Not great that you had the experience, but a great example. Poor listener just put in the comment. Others.
I can share an experience with a mentor before too. I once had a mentor who was supposed to guide me on how to be a leader, and she wasn't interested in leadership at all. She just leadership positions.
That's really funny. I'm not funny, but yeah. Great example. So, you know, that's the other thing. If somebody's in a role of being a mentor and they don't want to be a mentor, they're probably not going to be a very good mentor, right? Because being a mentor, well, we'll talk about the characteristics, but it requires interest, I think, at the very least. Others.
I would say, I guess in my experience, has been almost like a detachment or lack of engagement with either ideas or concepts or whatever it may be. And so not really demonstrating, it may be tied to like being a poor listener or something like that too, but it's, I think, also not showing a connection to either shared interests or sort of having sort of overlapping interests, in other words. So
great example. Any other examples of not a good mentor before we move on to the I remember as a master's student, I was in a program in which we all pretty much got to teach, which was a blessing and a wonderful thing. And I didn't realize that it was unique, but we all got to teach undergrad our first semester. And there was like a 1 day, it was like Friday before classes start. It's a 1 day thing. You show up, they give you the book. You know, I'm teaching general psychology. I've never taught. I just graduated. And at that point I was 22 and looked like I was 12. And so that was not working in my favor. And the population of students they were commuter students. And so most of them were my parents' age. And I had a class of 50. And I was given the book and I was assigned the mentor, and class started the next week, literally like days later. And I remember him just being like, okay, well, you know, just do it and we'll meet, we'll check in once in a while, and if you have any issues, let me know. And that was at a point where graduate education did not include mentoring students to teach, but they wanted students to teach. And of course it's very different now. We've come a long way. But I just remember thinking, like, I have to totally like pretend like I know what I'm doing. Like I'm having to do this on my own. Like it really freaked me out. And I thought, well, I'm getting paid to do this. I'm expected to do this. I'm just going to do it. And so I did. And to be honest, I don't know how I got through that first semester, but you know, he said, hey, you know, it's just very casual, right, about the whole thing. And you know, I'm a pretty laid back person, but when considering our role and our no experience, it was not helpful. And he was a nice guy, but I think I remember meeting once as a group, and that was pretty much it. And so I kind of self-taught in the very beginning. So now let's think about, so in the chat, not believing in you, absolutely. Poor listener, not supportive, oh my gosh. You know, and unfortunately, sometimes there's cases of discrimination. I've heard stories, not at this institution, but in other places where mentors actually, you know, discourage their mentees, just, they're too busy, they can't be bothered, so they either give them busy work or they just ignore them. That was part of that as well. So okay, think about your favorite mentor. Think about who that is, and you've got that person in mind hopefully already. What are their traits and qualifications, traits, characteristics? What makes them a good mentor? Motivational, supportive, pushes you out of your comfort zone. That's a good one. Enthusiastic, has expertise. Great. What else? Two people that said out of comfort zone. Yes.
The person that I loved the most was really structured and like helped me be structured in a way that I didn't know how to do because I was just, kind of that young master's student as well and didn't have that kind of knowledge base yet.
Yes. And no, so I think what you're also saying is being very aware and attuned to your developmental level, right? So as a new master student, learning these things, needing more structure than somebody who's had more experience, and knowing that, it sounds like they were very wise in that way. Being supportive, being flexible and understanding. Absolutely. What else? What are other traits, characteristics?
I would say being willing to go above and beyond, needs. I mean, not necessarily every time, but maybe in certain instances, and willing to help in ways that are perhaps unexpected.
Okay.
With the structure and support.
Okay. So going above and beyond. I think that's a great way to put it. Going beyond what their maybe duties are, right? Or their defined role, perhaps, to make sure you get what you need. Mm-hmm. Anybody else? When I think of my mentor, I mean, I've had mentors as a graduate student, but as a professional, I was very fortunate to meet this woman the first year that I was an assistant professor, and I've worked with her 14, 15 years now. We don't even live in the same country. I met her at a conference, and I heard a lot about her. And one of my previous mentors as a graduate student says, you need to go talk to so-and-so, and you need to be friends with them, and you need to find out about their research. So I remember being very bold early in my career and going up to this woman and saying, hey, I've got this money set aside as a new assistant professor, and I'm just really interested in what you do. Can I come visit you? I asked, can I come visit you? And she said, well, sure. And at the time, I guess I didn't think so much of it, but it's a lot for a stranger to say, hey, can you take a week out of your life and show me what you do? That's a lot, right? So I was very fortunate, and I went to meet with her, and I had all these ideas about what her research was or what I wanted to learn, and quickly learned that what she did was much more time consuming and more tedious and just brilliant, to be honest. And I remember that week that I was there thinking, oh my gosh, and she's so gracious with her time. Like, I didn't know what to expect. I thought I was just going to show up, and just kind of be a fly on the wall, right? And no, they got me involved. They got her and her team, which were graduate students, they got me set up so that I could start to learn their particular analysis, which is very, very involved and inductive in nature. And so I was at Texas Tech at the time. I came back from that trip, and it was my second semester, the spring semester of 2007. And she had said something to me while I was there. She's like, I'd love to continue to work with you. And I said, great. So I immediately, sent her an email and said, hey, let's set up a regular meeting. She was like, great. So it was probably like 6 months later or so. And I don't even know how we started the conversation, but she says, lots of people have come to visit me, and you were the only person that followed through with the project. Like you kept reaching out, you took initiative, you said, I want to do this. And she says, you're really the only person that's ever followed through. And so I'm going to commit to working with you. Like, we're paired up, right? And I just, first of all, I couldn't believe that. I couldn't believe that this person who's so brilliant would not have anybody that would follow through on their end. I thought that was weird. Fortunate for me. But that was the start of our relationship. So I put my foot out there, I could put myself out there to make the connection. But once she knew that I was committed, in terms of a good mentor, she was like, this is somebody that I can invest in because they value my work. And she saw that as an opportunity. She's really good at that. So again, working with her for years, doing research, all of these things. But I think the other piece is we developed that personal relationship too. As time went on, and of course I had been out of school, more time had passed. She was the person I called for work advice. She was the person that even until recently, I still communicate with her often. And so it was about that relationship. Okay, so you have different kinds of relationships with students and mentoring at various levels. But for us, I valued her as a person. I looked up to her as a friend, as a colleague, as showing the way, guiding me, And so when I think about a mentor, she is the utmost, checks all the boxes. And so I guess about 6 months ago, I asked if I could do an interview with her because in our field, she was very young and she was mentored by a lot of very famous people. And I wanted to know about her experience. And she was coming out with a book. So she wrote a very famous book when she was 19, 20 years old. And 50 years later has come up with the second edition. And so I was really curious about her experiences. And she told me, as a amazing mentor herself, she told me story after story of all the people in her life that meant that's what the interview was. This person mentored me on this. This person mentored me on this. My success was built on this. So I think to be a good mentor, you have to be on the receiving end too. To know, a lot of people say they want strategies. The strategies are knowing what worked for you. Doesn't mean that will work for everybody that you mentor, but what are the pieces that were really helpful? And being supportive and listening and pushing you out of your comfort zone, all of those things make a good mentor, right? So I wanted to share that whole story because our experiences as a mentee really influence and shape our role as a mentor. Now, if you had bad experiences, you may be kind of looking more for direction in terms of how to be a mentor. But when I think not only that, professional mentorship that continues today, also as a student, to thinking what those experiences were like. And it kind of scares me a little bit because she's in her 80s and my other mentors are getting up there, and I think, oh my gosh, I always want to have a mentor in my life. I always want to have somebody that's got more experience, who has an expertise, who can help me, right? And I never want to feel like I don't need a mentor myself. So as the group that I work with ages, it always, in the back of my mind, it's like, oh my gosh, not only do I want to be a mentor for students now, obviously, but I want to make sure that I always have somebody mentoring me through my process as I develop. And I think that's a really important piece. I think sometimes when mentors get to a place where they don't have their own mentor or haven't had a lot of great mentoring experiences, that's when you'll see those not so great mentors pop up. So I just wanted any feedback or comments from some of the qualities that I shared about my mentor. Oops. Excuse me, I just dropped the lid to my water. If I don't pick it up, I'm going to make a mess. Okay. The other thing that I wanted to mention about when I met her is, okay, so she's this brilliant woman, and the confidence piece and the pushing me out of my comfort zone, all automatically, she was saying these nice things and was really encouraging. And I was like, not that I didn't have mentors that were encouraging, but I thought, wow, like she is really putting a lot of effort into engaging with me, right? And supporting me and making sure I have everything I need. And that she did a lot of that up front. And I was almost kind of felt a little guilty for taking her time and all of that expertise. But it was a two-way street, right? I was willing to accept that. I was willing to go back and run with those ideas where other people had before. And I thought, how many people have missed out of that opportunity of working with her? But I'm glad I had that opportunity. So I would also say, as a doc student, as going into your profession, maybe you're going to academia or not, just remember, always look for a mentor. You're never at a place where you don't need that. It just may be different. Your mentoring and the person who mentors you may look very different. New faculty, I know part of this too is like with junior faculty. It's very important as a junior faculty member to be mentored in the academic system. So the woman that I mentioned, her name is Jan. So Jan was my academic mentor, even though she wasn't even in the same country. She was in Canada. She wasn't even, but she really served that role because at the time where I was physically at in the program that I taught, there wasn't really anyone available. Everyone had administrative positions, and there wasn't an assigned mentor mentee for new faculty in place. And so I really had to seek out my own person to mentor me. And I don't remember anybody telling me I needed to do that. I just thought that sounds like a good idea because I still want to learn and grow, and I'm brand new, and those things. So I want to pause for a minute. I don't want to do all the talking, but anybody else want to share anything about good mentors? Hopefully you all are still there. So I'm a communications researcher too. And what we know about communication is that we don't get feedback of some type, that we tend to become disfluent in our talk because we don't know. I don't know if you're still there or not, maybe. That's a joke. I winked my eye, but I think that is important too. I see some in the comments. Great. Awesome. Okay, mentoring is primarily a professional relationship, but also personal. The relationship between the mentor and mentee is developed over time and changes, absolutely. I think about my example with Jan is being an assistant professor. And so I'm technically still associate professor, but I was promoted to full, and that will be in place in July. And who was the person that I wanted to reach out to first? Jan. And I sent her an email, and she emails me back, and she says, well, she says, me and my colleagues used to joke that when we achieved full professor, she's emeritus, by the way, when we achieved full professor, that we were finally grown-ups. And it made me laugh because, and she was some other supportive things too, but our relationship has changed over the years based on my developmental level and my experience. And again, just our relationship in general. A mentor's main goal should be to develop a mentee into an ethical, competent, independent professional in their field so they can attain employment in the future. And the mentor-mentee relationship, absolutely. A good mentor is someone who invests, who goes above and beyond, who really cares about the outcome for the student. It's not just a job, right? It's not just a role at the university that they play. They actually really want that person to succeed. This is from my advising statement that I wrote earlier. Awesome. I think that's absolutely great. An important thing. So again, our experiences on receiving mentorship that was helpful. I'm thinking of a negative one too. I had a mentor once, and she was helpful at times, but then at other times I could tell that I was labor and so it was very confusing to me whether she really was looking after my best interest or not. And I think as a student, that can happen sometimes. And if you have the opportunity to choose someone who's your mentor, I think that's great, and to be very careful about that. As well as if you're a mentor, choosing those that you want to mentor, mentees, choosing your mentees, I think is very important too. So in my field in couple and family therapy, we have, after you graduate with your master's, you still have to go through a supervision process. It's about 2 years in order to get licensed. So I do mentorship not only as a faculty member, but I also mentor students, former students, who are working towards licensure. So it changes, right? The role shifts, the mentoring relationship shifts, and I become I'm their supervisor. I almost lost my train of thought, what I was going to say about that in terms of that, that state intern level. But see, I'm not getting any feedback. See, I'm losing my train of thought. That's research is showing itself to be true. But that is a very unique situation as well. And I adjust the way that I interact with them based on their developmental level. So a new therapist, first semester, who's never seen a client, I treat very differently, developmentally very differently than I do someone who has a degree, someone who's seeking licensure. And if I think of the specific road that I was going down, I'll add to that. Oh, I know what I was going to say. So in my role as a state supervisor, I can take on whoever I want. And so somebody emails me and says, hey, would you be my supervisor? And I say, okay, you're interested. So I need a CV. I need 2 letters. I need 2 references. And I would say half the time nobody responds back, because I want to make sure if I'm investing in them, they're also willing to invest in our relationship and to take it seriously and to have a good recommendation, right? For it to be, because really it's on my license. So I have to be very careful about that. And so I think that's another interesting point too, in terms of if you're a mentor, being able to choose your mentees. And my mentor did the same thing, right? She invited me to come, but she only continued to work with me because I put in that effort. I showed her that I was serious and dedicated and willing to do that. Okay, I want to take a pause here. Comments, thoughts. You can go to the next slide, by the way, Jess, if you want. Just giving a moment. So I mentioned about developmental appropriateness. We've got undergrads, grads, and separating between master's and PhD, postdocs, which is kind of that in between the PhD and the junior faculty. Again, very different ways to approach mentorship. And for some of you, it's been at the undergrad level, right? You're a graduate student, you're a doc student, you're mentoring undergrads. If you have the opportunity to mentor master's students as a PhD student, I would highly recommend that. Again, for you to be able to really practice and see what those differences are developmentally. James mentioned that he mentors in the workforce, and that is a different type of mentoring as well. So I just have a few notes here in terms of what we might focus on, what I might focus on with people. So, at the undergraduate level, it's really about obtaining knowledge. So they go to class, they ask questions, the grad level is you're wanting to transition for them to become more independent thinkers. So you're developing professionals if you have a professional master's degree, getting them to think on their own. The doctoral level, really focusing on researchers and academicians. Now in our field, a lot of people get a PhD and their research is like, research is okay, but I want to get a doctorate because as a therapist, I can get paid more. I can have the PhD. So our field is a little bit different because it doesn't naturally attract people that are just sold out to research, because in our field, in terms of credentialing, we only need a master's to practice couple and family therapy. The PhD allows us to charge more from the insurance companies, but it's not a requirement like a psychologist where you would need a PhD to practice psychology. So my perspective may be a little bit different there, in terms of not all PhDs that I've worked with have been interested research. So I will ask them, what are your career goals? Are you going to go a clinical route and you're doing this for the title, or do you really want to go to academia? And now if you want to go to academia, do you want to go to a teaching university? You want to go research focused in R1? Because there are different things that I want to help them with from the beginning so that I can really see what their goals are and tailor our mentoring towards that. Postdocs, we're actually going to get our first postdoc in our program this year. So I've mentored PhD, master's, undergrad, and junior faculty, but postdoc is kind of, at least in our field, is a newer niche. And we are going to have a new person for the fall. So I'm very excited about that opportunity. But in my approach, I will probably take it more from a junior faculty, because in lots of ways they just don't have the tenure track position, but they're building themselves, their CV to go into that role. Any comments about just in terms of the differences between mentoring at different levels? And Jessica, in the meantime, Jess, you can move the slide if you want. Okay, strategies. Look, it's already on the PowerPoint. You read my mind. That's the next thing I was going to talk about anyways. So strategies, there's lots of different types of things. So I think for recruiting mentees, to have a strategy for that. A lot of you talked about that's what you wanted to get out of this workshop. So I think it starts with, if you have a choice to choose the mentee, or if they have a choice to choose you, that it needs to be a mutual decision, that it's good fit for both of you. There's some instances in job situations, let's say too, where you don't have the choice of a mentor or mentee. But when you do, I think it's really important to be thoughtful about that. Matching people with their personality and work styles. So you can ask them again to have, well, this would be if we were live, that I would have you fill out a form about what you're looking for in a mentor, which we talked about a little bit already. What is the best mentor that you've ever had? What is that like? What is that person like and their characteristics? People with the same interest. And so this can have a little, it depends. Like, I think there has to be a common thread. Either your personality, you're both type A, you get along great that way, you're both organized, or it's an interest in subject matter. It's sometimes rare to find someone all the way around that really is a kind of a perfect fit. My experience, those students come around once every couple years. That student where you're like, your personality lines up, you get along great, you're interested in the same subject matter and or methods. I mean, that doesn't happen all the time. When it does, take advantage of that situation and the sense of continuing to collaborate. When the students that I think about that I've had that kind of connection with in terms of a lot of similarities, I still publish with them, I still present with them, and now they're bringing their students. I'm like the grandma now at the conference, right? They're bringing their students in, and I remember thinking, well, I have to see them in a different light. My first doc student, so he started in 06 in the fall when I started as a faculty member in 06. And it was one of these perfect storm, everything lined up. He actually worked with Jan, my mentor, and I, and he knew her because she was well known. And so he got that experience. We had a great working relationship. And when he graduated, I remember a mutual friend saying, talking about how the relationships changed, because that's the first time I'd had the experience of, I have a student and now they've graduated and they're a colleague. And so that was a very interesting learning experience for myself about how to, again, shift the friendship and mentoring based on their level, having graduated and being a colleague now. So I'm much better at that than but I, of course, had never done that before. So it was interesting to think about that was a big shift. I know it was for me on the receiving end as a mentee and getting my PhD, and then having my mentors now be my colleagues that I would still ask, advice from and things like that. Okay, you can go ahead to the next slide, Jess. Thanks. Okay, for cultivating mentoring relationships. So how do you cultivate that relationship? Cultivating that too. We talked about sometimes you can choose, sometimes you can't, but you're going to have some relationships that are just a better fit than others. And I think as a mentor, if you don't feel like you're a good fit for that student, and if there's a better option to help, maybe help coach them into that option. And I don't really see that so much anymore, but it used to be sort of a turf war with mentors, like, oh, your student works with you and they want to work with you and not me, and feel kind of threatened by that. I've never felt threatened by a student wanting to work or not work with me. but there are some people that do, and I think to be mindful of that as well. If you want to go to the next slide. Okay, questions. What questions do you all have? We have about 10 minutes left. Thanks. Oh, Jess, you're muted if you're trying to speak.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to make sure I'm getting any directly to ask on students' behalf.
Yes, if you don't want to ask directly, you can message Jess.
So actually, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So in light of the whole pandemic and, you know, new cohorts, especially the most recent cohort feeling sort of distanced in probably most departments, if not all, I found out in my department they're going to be starting a sort of senior graduate student mentoring program to the newer graduate students within the department. And so being one of, I guess, you know, quote, more senior graduate student in the department myself, I was wondering what sort of dynamics or any sort of things I should be aware of or cautions or anything like that in terms of mentoring, you know, like an MA student or something like that, being a student myself.
Yes.
Faculty member.
That's a good question, a good point. And I wanted to mention that my relationship with my mentor, Jan, I mean, I met her physically and we communicated, and then I went for a week, and then I'd see her like once a year, right? So all of our stuff was, all of our research, everything we did was virtual. So I think I have a unique perspective on virtual mentoring as well, because that's how our relationship is based. I've seen her in person maybe this many times, right, over the last 14 years. So what advice? I think when you're a student and you're mentoring other graduate students, sometimes they assume that, oh, we're buddies and pals because we're both graduate students. And in some ways you have a lot in common, but I think you have to really think about what are the boundaries that you're going to set for that mentor-mentee relationship. And I think it really varies, you know, if you're a faculty member and you mentor students, but if you're both graduate students, there's some other dynamics there. That can be a tricky one, and maybe one of the more tricky ones, being mentoring another student or being a new junior faculty member and mentoring students that are just a year behind you. Because I tend to look young for my age, and when I was hired at my former institution, I was the younger by at least 10 years. And so the doc students were closer in age and experience to me than my colleagues. And that was really interesting. On a personal note, it was interesting. It was hard to make friends because my colleagues, peers, were not, I mean, they had kids and they were older, and we didn't have as much in common, but I had much more in common with my doc students. And I think a doc junior faculty member relationship is also different than a master's, PhD mentoring relationship. But I think being very careful about, I won't say careful, clear about the boundaries and expectations, because they're going to look to you for those. So you have to decide, in my mind, okay, so in our field and in my role, what constitutes a mentor-mentee relationship? Where are the boundaries? As a therapist and as a supervisor and as an educator, anytime somebody is working with me and I have a position of power over them, I have to be very clear that we're not equals in that sense. We can be friends, but I'm not going to come to them and burden them with all my stuff, right? If I'm in that position of at least perceived power. So I think that can be tricky. And I think there can be a whole workshop on that. But be very clear for yourself. Some people are more boundary than others. I knew a colleague once that her supervisees at her place of employment didn't know anything about her, didn't know where she lived, she never had them over, never went to eat to lunch or anything. And it created for a very awkward environment because they felt like they couldn't relate to her. They couldn't go to her if they had an issue because she was so standoffish. So I think there's a good happy medium. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, that helps a lot. I appreciate it.
I think that's the thing. It's the boundary. What is the boundary? And you have to, as the person who's in charge, you have to set the boundary and the tone.
Okay, no, that's great. Thank you.
For sure.
I did have some questions
Sure.
directly chatted to me. What are the advantages to being a mentor, would you say? And also considering what can a mentor gain from having a mentor-mentee relationship?
Great question. What's the benefit? Why do it, right? That's a great question. I'll try to be succinct in my answer given the time. I think it can be a wonderful learning experience for both the mentor and the mentee if the mentor is invested. I think about siblings, okay? So I'll compare it because I'm a family therapist. You have an older sibling and a younger sibling. If the older sibling is into the kid, is the younger one. So my daughter was 6 when we had our middle child. She was all about the baby. She wanted to be, she was the mentor role. She was all about it. She was invested. Great relationship. If the mentor is like, I don't see really any benefit of this, I don't really know what I'm going to get at, I'm more interested in myself, then you shouldn't be in a role of a mentor because it's not going to serve the mentee. So I think first of all, it's something you should be invested in. Advantages of that role of being a mentor. I know what I would want to look for in a mentor myself, so that's helpful because I feel like I always need a mentor. All of us do. And just get a lot of, when I teach practicum, which is our clinical course where we train students to be therapists, my husband will even notice that I am happier and I have more energy when I'm teaching that particular class because I've got several mentor-mentee relationships all at the same time. It's very intensive. And I personally just get a lot out of it. I look forward to supervising. I look forward to not only helping them, giving them a tip or an advice or a strategy, but to learning from them as well. I've learned a lot from my mentees. And I wouldn't trade that. I see it as a privilege. And so, but I want to make sure that I honor that privilege and that I'm doing them service. I hope that kind of answers. I think there could be a lot of, like I love to teach. I get so much out of teaching. I'm just energized and it just makes me feel good. But not everybody has that, and that's okay. If you don't have that, that's good to know that you just want to make sure that you're not putting yourself in a position and that you're detrimental to other students or mentees, if that's not your thing.
Yeah, no, I totally what you're saying there. It's like seeing your field and with like fresh eyes, right? With every mentee, right? And seeing what they bring to your field or to your profession. That is learning too, right?
Absolutely.
You're the expert in the field.
And just one thing to add on to that, the longer you do it and the older you get, now I'm learning things from my mentee that are generational things, things about the culture and their generation that I'm just like, what? And if I have clients in that same generation, I'm going to miss the boat. And so they're teaching me now that there's enough age difference. It takes a while, but once there is or experience difference, they're now teaching me about my own clients that I wouldn't know. So,
yeah. If it's okay,
sure.
to ask just one more question. I think this is a really great one. What different mentorship opportunities are you familiar with or aware of? Maybe even Nev could share programs that are available on campus to help us as graduate students really refine our mentorship skills.
I'm going to defer to Nev for that because you all have the structure in the grad college for that. But the piece that I would add on to what she is going to say is to reach out to your program as well to see what they offer too.
Sure. I'll share a few programs that we have. So a lot of the people on this call are in our RAMP program, in which it's more research based, and you're paired with an undergraduate mentee where you work on research together. And then the graduate students in the RAMP program are actually in our graduate college mentorship certification, where they kind of get to hone in on their mentorship skills. But if you want to just learn how to expand your mentorship skills, you don't have to be in ramp. You can just apply for the graduate college mentorship certification, where you can work with a mentee. And then another program we have is Grad Advantage, which prepares undergraduate students for graduate education. And we do ask for mentors to graduate students to apply to be mentors, and they get to be paired up with a cohort of undergraduates and guide them through this process and share the experiences they went through when they were applying to grad school as well. And then I know that GPSA just recently also started a mentorship program as well. And I don't have all the details for that, but I'm sure if you went on their website, you can learn more about their mentorship program as well. And I think that one is geared towards pairing undergrads and grads that are studying similar fields of study.
I would take advantage of those. Just like the teaching thing, we didn't have that when I was a doc student. I learned from my own experience as a mentee, and I had to just go out and do it. I didn't get much direction on it, is what I'm saying. Now there's so many programs and opportunities to do that within your graduate study. I would highly recommend to do that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Jordan, for sharing your time with us, your expertise, your patience, but also enthusiasm with us today. Thank you to all of our participants for joining us as well. I did share in the chat our workshop feedback surveys from the graduate college. Really short. If you could take a pair of minutes and share some feedback with us, it would mean so much to us and really help us improve the workshops that we are providing for you all as a part of our Grad Rebel community. Thank you again, Dr. Jordan, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Have a great week.
Bye.